I'm Madison Mary. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have my September wrap-up. So I had a great reading month. I had some new favorites. In the month of September, I read 14 books. 3 of them were physical and 11 of them were ebooks. 3 of them were young adult and 11 of them were adult. You can kind of guess where that was going. Genre-wise, I read 2 fantasy books, 1 contemporary fantasy book, 1 contemporary book, 3 romances, 1 motorcycle club romance, 2 mafia romances, 1 historical romance, an alien romance, and 2 dark romances. There we go. There they all are. That was a lot. And finally, my page count for September was 4,085 pages. Woo! Okay, so as per normal, I'm going to start with my lowest rated read and work up to my highest rated read. I do have 1 book that I did not rate because it was like a 50-page prequel novella, and I don't really rate those. So that was Mafia Air by Elle Steel. This is the prequel to her like mafia books, and so I wanted to read this before I went into them because it's the prequel of like why he decides to kidnap the girl in like the actual series. So not much to say. It's a dude ends up kidnapping a girl for collateral damage, and in this prequel you learn about him and his brothers and who they are. We do have a 2.5 star book, and that is Home Again. This is part of the Las Vegas Aces, and I thought this was a sport romance series. It is, but it's a series following the same damn couple. And it's like 190 pages the first book, the next book's like 220, like they're all these like really short stories following this couple. And it was extremely unsatisfying because I thought it was following the one couple, and then this ends on like a massive cliffhanger, and I was like, well, for this to be an actual series, then I actually hated the book. Like if it was just that one book as a romance, it would have been like 3 or 4 stars. But because it ends up being an actual series, I was like, no, 2.5, I hated it. It did have a really, really sexy sex scene that had to do with them in a hotel against a window. That was hot. So the girl we're following, she just lost her job and her boyfriend on the same day because she was caught having the sexy times with him in the office. So she ends up moving to Las Vegas where her brother is a football player, and she like ends up there because he's having his wedding, and so she's really excited. She goes to the wedding. It's her best friend is marrying her brother, and then she's having this one night with a guy while at the bridal party, and then the next day she ends up seeing him again, and she ends up finding out that he is actually not only her brother's best friend, but he is also the guy who is the best man, and also the guy that she will be living with because she doesn't have any place to stay. And they're not allowed to be together. It's like a forbidden romance, but they kind of like have this crazy attraction to one another. And he has like a really messy past, and she has a messy past, and it was just meh. Then we have my 3-star reads. I'm going to start with Planet Barbarians because I don't really have much to say about this. It's Planet Barbarians. I will admit the vlog where I did read this is freaking hilarious because I got like 2% in and I was like, what am I reading? What is this book? 3 out of 5 is pretty average. I wasn't going to continue on with it, but then Berkeley just released the special edition cover for the 2nd book, and I was like, maybe I will continue because that's kind of pretty. But basically this, if you don't know what Planet Barbarians is, it's a smutty alien romance about blue aliens. There are these human women who are abducted, and then their ship that they're like abducted in ends up crash landing on this other planet. And the main girl that we follow in this one meets this like gigantic blue alien, and he's like, oh my god, she's my mate, and she's like, what the hell is going on? I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was just hella weird at the same time. The writing wasn't the best, but my guess is that everything, like her writing will definitely improve as the series goes on. Like people end up loving like the 7th or 8th book in this series. It's just, do I want to commit to that? I don't know. We then have Secret Puck by Rebecca Jenshak. This is a new adult college hockey romance. 3 out of 5 stars. It was pretty average for me. I don't know, I feel like when it's come to like college romances, especially like sport romances, I've gotten a lot picky. This one felt very run-of-the-mill, very cliched. You're following Mackenzie and Brooks. Mackenzie is a freshman at college. Her brother is like the hockey team captain, and so when she gets to university, she's like not really having the best time because her boyfriend Lily just broke up with her, and so she's kind of like moping around, and her brother's like, hey, you should be really living up your freshman experience, come hang out with me, come out with the team. And she hangs out with the team and she ends up meeting Brooks, and he's like the playboy of the team, and they like instantly hit it off and are instantly attracted to one another, and it's their like secret forbidden romance during the course of this book. He's actually super sweet to her. There is just a lot of miscommunication towards the end of the novel, but I thought it was pretty well handled. It's just the main character, she's kind of really childish for a lot of the book, and that kind of like rubbed me, like I just wasn't enjoying it. Like she was 18 years old. She read like she was 18 years old. which is like, I can't fault the book for that, but it just was reading a bit younger than I want to be reading at the moment. And so like it ended up being fine. It's just your typical new adult college romance. And so if you're someone who's new to the genre, it's definitely a good place to start because it's like the most basic you can get. But I might continue on with her other books because this is a companion series to her basketball romance series, which I also had the first book of, which I thought was really cool. So who knows? Then we have another 3 out of 5 star. I've got like a couple this month, it's fine. We have A Rogue to Remember by Emily Sullivan. This is a historical romance. It's actually set in Italy, which is really unique and really fun. Like I loved that aspect of this, but for a historical romance, it was pretty run of the mill. I was actually getting kind of bored of the romance. There is a really fun like mystery action plot in this because the guy is a secret agent for the crown. But otherwise it was fine. So you're following Lottie, she's a lady, she's an heiress, she's very highly sought after, she has a great fortune like that she's gonna inherit, but she has absolutely no desire to ever marry, she just wants to be a spinster. And so in order to avoid, you know, being married off, she ends up running away to Italy. And her father, who is also like, you know, part of the crown and stuff, ends up sending one of his spies to go get her. And this spy is Alec, and Alec is like her childhood best friend who she fell in love with. And then he rejected her and like left abruptly, never spoke to her again until now. And so it's like a second chance romance, friends to enemies to lovers kind of situation between them. I will admit, like, my biggest problem was like I just didn't feel their chemistry. Like I understood they were both pining for one another, but I kind of wanted that to be built upon a bit more. I loved the Italian setting. I love that they were like traveling throughout this book. I love that there was like this mystery going on as well. And I loved the ending. Like the ending is so action-packed and just wild. And I am curious to see the next book in this series, which should be coming out I think sometime this year, which is following another spy of the crown, and he's really awesome. We met him in this book, but I just think that like there was just so many moving parts in this that it just didn't work for me, but I can see the potential of reading more from this author. We then have Luminous by Mara Rutherford. This is like very disappointing that it's a 3 out of 5 star, and I feel super, super bad about it. I did tab it and everything because I have loved her previous books, and this one just didn't meet it for me. Okay, the biggest problem I had with this is that I could not get it out of my head that the main girl, that this was by, it reminded me too much of Shadow and Bone. It reminded me too much of Shadow and Bone, and I can't get over that. I can't get over it. I'm so sorry. It is so similar to Shadow and Bone. At least in Shadow and Bone, I understood that Mel was in love with Alina. No. Actually, in both books, you were like, but does Mel really love Alina? And this one I was like, but does the dude really love her? I was like, where's the anyway. So in this world, you have like witches, mages, and warlocks. And in this world, you want to keep your magic a secret because if the king's head warlock finds out you have magic, he kind of enslaves you and uses you as like part of the empire and part of the kingdom. And so Leora, her entire life has been in hiding. Her magic is that she's literally luminous. Her magic is light magic. And what ends up happening is that the head warlock, Darius, ends up finding out about her, but instead of punishing her, he ends up taking her sister as collateral damage. And so Leora then has to find a way to stop him, and she ends up working with the Weaver, who lives next door to her, whose son she's actually in love with. And through the Weaver, she ends up finding out that Darius is having the Weaver create this like really evil tapestry, and she's like, I need to stop him from doing this. And so that's kind of what it's about. It's like her trying to take down Darius and prevent him while also trying to like learn control of her own powers because she's never really had access to them because she's been keeping them secret for so long. So it ended up being fine. Like I said, Darius is just like the Darkling. Like his magic is the fact that like he had this like great magic and then he burnt out and then his magic turned to evil and into like literally darkness. And so he is like drawn to Leora because Leora's light fills his darkness and like kind of gives him power back, and so he wants to be around her. But then Leora is in love with her childhood best friend, who is also like, you know, very 50-50 around her, so that's where the whole like Darklina, Melina kind of issue kind of comes in. I did love the world. I loved the world building in this. Mara Rutherford is great at creating her magic systems. I love that every single witch, mage, and warlock kind of had their own magic, and it was kind of cool seeing how everyone kind of used theirs to their own advantage. There are a lot of different characters in this book that I thought were really awesome. And like I loved the whole idea of like this tapestry that's being created, and the sisterly bonds and the mental health rep in this was really great, but overall it just fell subpar for a fantasy book. Then we have my 4 out of 5 star books. The first one is going to be Act Cool by Tobly McSmith. In this book you are following a trans male teen, and he has been prevented from transitioning his entire life because his family is very religious and his family refuses to believe that he identifies as male, and they end up threatening to send him to conversion camp. and so he ends up seeking help from his aunt, and then his aunt ends up getting him a spot at this performing arts academy in New York City. So he ends up running away to this performing arts academy and staying there. And that's kind of like what his journey is about. He's trying to live his life in New York. He's trying to, like, you know, embrace who he is, but at the same time he has this like constant fear of his parents and wanting them to love him. This is a very, very sad book. It is extremely emotional. It is very hard hitting. There's a lot of talk in this about suicidal ideation, transphobia. There's a lot of different things going on. So if any of that is triggering to you, please be aware. It's a much more serious book than his freshman novel. His freshman novel, Stay Gold, has like a romantic undertone and like a romantic subplot, whereas the romance in this really doesn't exist. It's like a subplot, and it's more our main character's like journey over the book instead. So it was actually really amazing. Actually, didn't I give this 4.5 out of 5 stars? I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. My bad. I think that like so many people need to read this because it just gives you an insight into like what someone is going through during this time, and you can kind of see how Tobly kind of put his own experience into this character, and like how he found solace through acting and how he found solace through the theater, because like the theater and acting is a massive part of this book as well. And I loved it. And they all acted like real messy teens. They acted like such real messy teens. Now for an actual 4 out of 5 star book, we have The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrun. This is an adult male-male romance. It is so adorable. Once again, this does deal with mental health rep, especially when it comes to anxiety and PTSD, and OCD is like very present in this book. But you're following Dev and Charlie. So Charlie is like this tech wonder kid, and he ends up getting chosen to be on this show that is basically The Bachelor. He's chosen to be the bachelor on this show. And when he gets there, his handler is this guy named Dev. And Dev has like loved this TV show from like the beginning of time. He is so adamant that like happily ever afters do exist, that this show does work, and he's so determined to like help Charlie like break out of his shell and like really find love on this show. But then the two of them end up falling in love instead. And it's really great because like it's also Charlie's coming out story, because like he never really, because like he'd never been in love before, he never really knew what his sexuality was, and so he's actually like learning and discovering and exploring his sexuality like over the course of this book, and like what he identifies as, if he wants to identify as anything, if he wants to use labels, which is really beautiful. It's also a rom-com. There are so many hilarious moments in this. I just love the entire cast. Like, I don't even watch The Bachelor. Like, I love Love Island. I don't watch The Bachelor, but I loved reading this anyway. So if you're not a fan of The Bachelor, still pick this up. But if you are a fan of The Bachelor, then you definitely need to pick this up. It wasn't like as fluffy as I thought this was going to be, like very fluffy. It does have a much more serious undertone with the mental health rep in it, but it was so beautifully woven in and so like gorgeous, because they're both struggling with their own things, and they both are afraid to tell anyone about their struggles. And they've both been ridiculed for their struggles before, because Charlie has had panic attacks and people just are like, what the hell? And Dev has depression, and he comes from a community where mental health is not openly accepted. And so I loved it. Such great representation in it. Like, definitely as like a queer romance, you need to pick it up. Then we have Defy the Knight by Brigid Kemmerer. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars too. I don't know why I went to 4.5 to 4 to 4. It's fine. It's fine, Madison. You screwed up. It's okay. We have this. I enjoyed this. I read it all on the airplane when I was coming back from Vegas, so I do think my experience reading this was definitely different from other people. I don't think I would have read it as quickly had I not have been like on an airplane the whole time. But basically this is set in a kingdom where I have a finished copy of this book. I'm too lazy. So it's set in this kingdom where there are like different sectors, kind of like, you know, think of the Hunger Games has like different sectors that have like different specialties, and 2 of the sectors grow this moonflower, and this moonflower helps cure this magical illness that is plaguing the land. And so you are following Tessa, and she is from the Wildlands, which is like on the outskirts of the main capital. And she's kind of like a Robin Hood character. She steals like moonflower and elixirs and dilutes them into like lower doses to give to the poor people who can't afford it, to help keep them safe. And she works alongside like one of her like friends until one day her friend is murdered, and she tries to like go to the castle to like get revenge, and she is caught and captured by the prince, and that is Prince Coric, and his older brother is currently king, and Prince Coric is known as like, shoot, what is Coric known as? The King's Justice, that's what he's called. He's the one who like performs the executions. He's the one who, you know, stops people from stealing the elixirs. He's the one who like does all the dirty work and all the murdering and stuff. So everyone is like terrified of him. And then it's the 2 of them kind of like how their paths cross. And like there's so much political intrigue in this. But that's what I really loved about this book. It is a duology. or is it gonna be a trilogy? I don't know, it's a series. But what I really, really loved about this was that political intrigue, all the court knowledge, all the kingdom knowledge, all these different moving parts between all the sectors, because there is someone who is like funding a rebellion and is like, we don't know who is funding that rebellion. Is it someone within the castle? Is it one of the other leaders? Is it like just a regular person? Like, who can you trust? Who's telling the truth? I loved that aspect of it. I love sitting here and being like, I don't know who we trust. Like, is it this person? Is it someone else? Like, I was constantly guessing. I did get some things correct. Like, some parts of this were kind of obvious, but I adored it so much. And like, I was always like having my suspicions, and I love when a book has that. So if you're a fan of court politics and like political intrigue in your fantasy books, you're gonna love this. I didn't adore the romance. The romance could have been better in my opinion, especially because like I've read Brigid Kemmerer's other books and like I adored A Heart So Furious and Broken. Like, the romance in that was just so much better than the way that she wrote the romance in this book, but I still loved our characters and I loved this world. There's so much potential here. It was so easy to read. Like, it's definitely like an easy YA book. Like, if there's someone who's like looking to get into like the YA fantasy genre, I would hand them this book because it's a world that's very easy to understand, and even though it has a lot of moving parts, it like really keeps you intrigued. And I love the whole Robin Hood aspect of it because that was really fun, and I love how Tessa like has such like a brain for like chemistry, and like how she like kind of becomes like involved in like the political intrigue and stuff. So I really did enjoy it. It's like a really, really solid 4 out of 5 stars, like super, super solid. Then we have my 5-star books, and I'm so excited. There's so many great ones here. What am I gonna start with? So A Curse in Ash is a polyamorous fae fantasy romance. You're following Ash, and she is a really, really powerful witch. She's also half high fae, and she is engaged to Brynark, who is a dark, unseelie fae prince, and she works in the human realm for the supernatural police department, helping them like keep track of like magical things with like her witchy powers. She can like track magic, and she can like track the fae that are like illegally coming through like the veil. And then you have Reardon, and he is a human who lives in England, and his parents and him, like his entire family, has like the sight, like they're able to see magic, and because of that they're able to be like kind of like vessels and human partners to witches and help like the witches like funnel magic and like make them more powerful. And every human with the sight basically has a witch mate that they are like bound to like help them with their power. And so when Reardon's parents are murdered, he ends up fleeing England and moving to the United States in order to avoid like finding his like witch mate. The only problem is that when he gets to the United States, he meets Ash, and it turns out that she is his bondmate. And so it's Ash's romance between her, Brynark, and Reardon. It's like actually a polyamorous relationship between the three of them. It's male, female, male, so it's like her with both men, not both men and her at the same, because never the three of them doing stuff together. I do think in like the next couple books, I think we're gonna maybe see like some male-male action, because like in this book there was like a little bit of hinting towards that, but it was like such like a healthy relationship between the three of them. It is adult, it is spicy, there are some like pretty smutty scenes in this at the same time, but also it is like such a healthy look at like a polyamorous relationship. Like all three of them have like all these conversations throughout the book, and like they're always constantly communicating like how they feel and like talking about consent and how comfortable they are and like what they mean to one another and their feelings. And it is like such like, it's one of the healthiest relationships, especially like polyamorous relationships I've ever seen in a book. Like this throuple is so healthy, it is ridiculous to me. And Brynark, our like buff and burly like powerful dark fae prince, is also a cinnamon roll marshmallow, okay? He is like at home cooking the food, giving her back rubs, like making sure she's good. He's like, because he's like fully fae, like he doesn't sleep much, like he stays up all night playing video games. Like I am in love with this man so much. I love Ash. She's so badass. She's so like confident in her sexuality, like who she is. She's not afraid to like put other people in her place. She loves her power, she loves her magic, and she's not afraid to use it. It was just a really awesome world. I give Julie so much kudos to this book. It literally just released, and I highly recommend it. Then we have Savage Lover by Sophie Lark. This is book 3 in the Brutal Birthright series, which is a mafia romance series set in Chicago. So in this book, you're following Nero Gallo. He is the second eldest son of the Italian mafia in Chicago. He's very volatile, very sexy. He's like kind of the wild card. Everyone's quite afraid of him because you never know what he's going to do. He's obsessed with cars, does car racing, fixes cars and things like that. He's also, you know, a huge, huge, huge playboy. And then you have Camille, and she is a mechanic. Her family's extremely poor. Her brother is like trying to make ends meet, and he ends up accidentally getting caught with drugs. And so Camille ends up taking the fall for him and becomes an informant for the police so that her brother and her don't have to go to jail because of his mess up. and then it ends up being a romance between Camille and Nero, and like, oh my god, it was so amazing. Like, it's my favorite one out of the series so far. Nero is just so hot. He is so hot, and Camille is such a badass. Like, she's so sassy. Like, she tries to follow the rules, she tries to stay by the law, but she's like also like not afraid of like biting back, and like she gives as good as she gets, and it's like she's so much fun to be around. And their romance was so sweet because like he is like I said, he's a playboy, but he meets Camille and he's like, I enjoy just being around her, I enjoy just being in her presence. She's just like, I want to go slow with her because like I don't want to treat her like I have with every other woman. And Camille is just like, oh my god, this man, like he's a monster, but he's so beautiful. Like I'm becoming obsessed with him, and like it's such a good, oh my god, I love their romance. And there's like so much action in this, and there's also a heist. There's a heist in this book, and I love heists. So amazing. Can't wait to continue with the series. Then we have one of my new favorite books as well, which is Lessons in Corruption by Giana Darling. This is a motorcycle club romance. So good. This is age gap. It is also student teacher, which I know can be very problematic. I normally hate age gaps. I normally hate student teacher relationships, but I read this book and I loved it to shit. I love this book so much, it's not even funny. We're following Cressida, and she was in a very mentally abusive marriage. She had basically been groomed her entire life to marry this man when she turned 18, who was like 10 years her senior, who was like one of her family friends. And then one day she decides to separate and leave him. And then at a bar, she ends up meeting this really beautiful guy with this blonde hair who's like on a motorcycle, and they end up kind of like engaging into like a relationship. And then she later finds out that he's actually a student at her school. He's 18, she's 26, 27, I believe. And so it's their romance. King, who is the guy, he's the heir to the motorcycle club. His dad is like the head of it. And King is just like amazing. He's like, everyone views him as a bad boy because he's part of the Fallen Men because his dad runs it, but he's actually like such a sweetheart. I mean, like, he's dirty as all hell and like sexy and kinky AF, but he's also like such a sweetheart. He's like so intellectual and like philosophical with Cressida. He like looks after her, he like cares about her so much. He like leaves her these like little notes, he like does all these like tiny things for her, and like his love for her is just so beautiful and sweet. Like, oh my god, I loved it. And Cress, like over the course of this book, like it's her learning to live her life because she's been so sheltered. Everything that she's ever done in her life has been so controlled, and now that she's with King, she's like finally able to let loose and like actually be who she is and like indulge in her desires. And it is like also like super action packed. There's so much going on in this book. There's also a really sexy library scene. That's like literally all you need to know to read this book. But I love the crap out of this. I cannot wait to continue with the series. It's so funny because I feel like everyone either loves the second book, or they hate it from what I've seen in reviews, which is really funny. So I'm scared but excited to read the second one as well. We then have Games We Play by Dana Isley. This is, oh my god, this is a faceless gamer boy romance. So when I say faceless gamer boy, it's like those gamers like on Twitch and stuff whose face you never see. Like they might wear a mask or something, or like they'll have an image up, like you don't know what they look like, it's just their voice who's playing. So it's one of those guys who's like extremely famous. Like think of like Corpse Husband, basically, to a sense. And this journalist who comes over to like, you know, do an article on him, and they end up like having this like night together, and oh my god. This book is so hot. It is not for the faint of heart. Like, this is like one of the dirtiest books I've ever read. This book and the next one are the dirtiest books I've ever read in my entire life. They like, there's like a lot of different like kinks and like trigger warnings in this, so I do recommend you look them up. There's like a lot of BDSM, sub-dom like stuff that goes on in this. There's also some mention towards the end of this of eating disorders and suicide. I will admit, eating disorders and suicide are both triggers for me. They're triggers that I avoid. I actually went into this book not knowing that they were present in it. I will say that the eating disorder kind of trigger warning in this was fine for me, and I'm extremely sensitive to ED triggers, so this was actually okay. The suicide trigger, I think if you are someone who is triggered by that, don't read this because it is quite graphic, but I was still okay with it. It is still a super kinky book. I'm like, I could reread this 17 times over and never get sick of it. As a gamer girl, this is like my ultimate fantasy. If I could be this main character, I would. I would pay immense money to live out this book. I want this. I want this. And then lastly, the other messed up book is Devil's Advocate. This is book 2 in the Devil's Duet. I read book 1 last month, so you saw that in my wrap up. Don't want to give anything away. I will admit that book 2 blew me away. Like, I loved book 1, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Read this one, was blown away even further. I am so shocked because book 1 is like there's like so much shit goes down. You don't want to actually go into the series knowing anything, because I went into the series knowing nothing, but it is so messed up, but like somehow a really beautiful but messed up romance comes out of it. Like, these two messed up, betrayed, effed up people end up like finding love with one another. But like, this series has like literally every single trigger you can think, well, not every single trigger, but like there's like a lot of like, no, there's a lot. It's forbidden, there's taboo, there's like some stepdad stuff going on, some student teacher stuff, some BDSM stuff, some dubcon, exhibitionism, there is murder, there is a lot of death and killing, there's some peeing that goes on in this series. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Book 1 focuses on the backstory of the 2 men, and then book 2 focuses on the romance between one of the girls and one of the guys, which is really, really interesting. So I definitely recommend this, but it's not for the faint of heart. And yeah, that was my month. I would recommend any of the 5-star reads. Freaking love them. Just make sure you look up the trigger warnings for those last 2, because they are there. Those 2 are both on Kindle Unlimited, so if you do have KU, please pick them up. They're both super short. Let me know what your favorite book was in the month of September, and if you guys enjoyed this video, please like the button down below if you want to see more of me. Please go to my channel, and until next time, thanks a bunch everyone. Bye-bye.